Welcome! Thank you so much for coming and checking this out. So yesterday we created a basic timer that counted down from 60 and did a really good job at that. But if you went above 60 seconds, it was not really capable of doing anything other than saying, we're at 100 seconds. But you might have wanted to show minutes or have, a colon and seconds. And so in this example today, we've created both that as well as two buttons. And so let's go take a look and see how this works. So we're gonna go ahead and hit the green button. You can see we have a sound that goes off. We start counting down and we have seconds, and then it's gonna go down to more seconds. So we go from minutes to seconds now, and we still have a 0 showing there. And if we hit the stop button, we get another sound effect, it pauses, and if we hit the button again, it starts it up from the beginning. So this is a little bit more of an advanced timer, and I'm not gonna go into exactly how to make this, but I am gonna show you exactly how I did it, and hopefully that helps get you started. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've done. All right, so first of all, we have the kind of same setup as yesterday. We've got one text object, we have two buttons, and these buttons are both running two different triggers. Each trigger has its own script. The second script for the stop button is very simple. It just links it into the main script. So then we also have two sound effects. This sound effect should actually be right here on the button because that is where it's coming from. So sound is coming out of the button. This is a global sound, so it doesn't really matter where it goes. Now over here, let's go ahead and start by looking at the stop script since this is the most simple and it's really just kind of tying in. So when the trigger is entered, so we can see here, when event trigger is entered by player, send an event stop to the start timer. Under variables, we have defined start timer and then dragged it into our trigger. So here you can see that we have tied it to the original trigger just by dragging. So very simple there. Okay. Next up, we're going to go take a look at the main script. So under here, we can see we have when trigger is entered. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. When trigger is entered with player is received, if we are running, then we want to, if it's false, so we're not running, the timer is not running, then we're going to set running to true. So now we've started the timer, so we've set a variable that now is running. And now that it's true, we are going to play the sound effect, start sound effect, and then we're going to set countdown in motion to the countdown start plus number 1, same thing as yesterday, and then send timer loop to self. Now, when event stop is received, so this is the event we sent from the stop button, then we want to play a sound on stop sound effect. Then we're going to set the running to be false again, so now we've stopped running, so we tell it that it's false, and cancel sending event timer loop to self. So this is what's going to stop our timer loop in advance and let it pause on that number. So that's to self. Now when timer loop is received, let's go ahead and scroll down here. It's really easy for me to see this when it's small, but I know in the recording it's not, so I'm just zooming in real big for you guys. There we go. All right, when event timer loop is received, set countdown in motion to countdown in motion -1. Same code as yesterday. But here's where it gets completely different. We need 4 different if statements. Each of these is going to allow us to do something slightly different. For instance, if the number is greater than or equal to 60, we want to send this code, countdown in motion. So what we're going to send is, we're going to set the floor in motion to be this slightly complicated formula, but it's really not that complicated. What we're calculating is the floor. A floor is found under math. So if we go under math here, we can scroll down and find floor. So here's floor under basic math. Now what floor does is it finds the bottom value. So it goes to the bottom whole value, which means the decimal point that's left after dividing by 60 is removed. So we take our countdown in motion, say it's at 65, it's gonna divide it by 60, and then it's gonna be 1 point something, and it's gonna remove the decimal, and we're only left with the whole number. Next, we're gonna set the remainder. So this is gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna calculate this countdown in motion number, and then we're gonna subtract our initial number, floor in motion, leaving us with the remainder, which we then multiply by 60 to get the remaining amount of seconds. We'll then ascend the event display to self. Okay, so we'll get down to display, but display more or less is the same for all of this, so we're gonna get to that all together at the same time. But really what we're gonna do is just display this all cohesively. But now let's go to the next if statement. In the next situation, we have countdown in motion being 60 seconds or less. So this is when we get below, there's no more minute sign, so we'll send display 2 to self. All right, so pretty simple there. Now we also have a couple more things here. If the number is greater than 0, send event timer loop to self. So this needs to be set because we don't always want to send timer loop, otherwise it goes into the negatives. If you want it to go into negatives/overtime, then just remove this if statement and leave it running, and it'll just keep running, and then you can still hit the stop button and be at negative, so forth. Although it's not really set up to go into the negatives, so it might not look as clean as you would expect it to. So I recommend keeping it where it hits 0, alarm goes off, and buzzers up. Okay, let's continue scrolling down. All right, if countdown in motion equals 0, this means it has hit the end. We're not just above it, we are now at 0. We now need to set running to be false, so this ends it. We let it know that the timer is up, we're no longer running, and we want to play the stop sound effect. Okay, wonderful. Now how are we going to display this? And this is where I was talking about there being 4 different types of displays. So under event display, so this is display 1, if you will, we have if the number is greater than 10 for remainder in motion. So if the remainder is greater than 10, then we're going to display, using the text display, floor in motion as a string. As a string can be found here at the very bottom of the math section, and this converts any variable into a string. So a number needs to be converted into a string to work with a text string, and what we're going to be using is a text string to get that nice colon. And we also added a space. So what we'll see here is floor in motion as a string plus, so this will be 1 minute, plus space, colon, space, plus remainder also as a string. So we just use those variables as string and display it on our text. Pretty simple. The same thing is true here, except now that we're less than 10, we need to add a 0 to our string here. And that's how we keep it really clean. So same exact thing, except for we've added a 0. Now under display 2, it's also very similar, except for in this case, we no longer have the 1 minute, so there's no longer a floor. We only have 0 because we are now less than 60. That's what display 2 is about, is once we've hit below 60, we then can display 0, space, colon, space, countdown in motion. And once again, we also need to do 0, space, colon, space, 0, plus countdown in motion as string. And you'll notice here, we're using countdown in motion, not the remainder in motion, and not the floor in motion. That's because in this case, we haven't calculated a floor, we haven't calculated a remainder, we're just sticking with the default countdown in motion. This is basically the same exact one that we had yesterday, except for we've added the 0 to it and made it look a little bit fancier. All right, so that goes through all the code. I'm gonna quickly go through the variables so you can see them all in here. And you'll see that we have running, which is a Boolean variable. We have stop sound effect. This is a sound effect that we're tying into. We have start sound effect, which is another sound effect we're tying into. We have remainder in motion. We have floor in motion, and we have countdown in motion. These are the 3 variables we were just using. We have countdown start, so this is what number you're going to start at. We also have text, which ties into our text variable. So once again, I'm just going to quickly run through over here, and inside of the trigger, if I can get that up, there we go. Inside the trigger, you can see that we've tied to the text. We have tied to the sound effects. We have this set to default as off, and well, you shouldn't touch the running Boolean, don't mess with that. The only thing you want to mess with is this one. So right now it's starting at 1 minute and 5 seconds, but as you can see, we could type in, let's say, 5 minutes, which would be 60 times 5, so that's 300, and because I want some decimals in there, it was 312 seconds. And when we close out, come back in as a player, and hit the button. There is a very strange decimal. All right, so this really strange error where we're getting a decimal is most likely tied into the countdown in motion calculating as a remainder in motion. So what we need to do is do this math slightly differently. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning with a brand new set 2. Now what we're going to do is just drag over everything we're going to keep. So obviously we're setting the remainder in motion, but we don't want to keep all of this. So I want this available to me as I need it, but what we're actually going to do is going to be almost the opposite. So what we want to do is grab a subtractor, and we're going to grab minus. So grab minus, and now we're going to grab the countdown in motion, and we are going to subtract from it the multiplication of floor and 60. So theoretically, this should pull up a round number. And we'll go ahead and delete this. So this is a little bit more clean. So what you see here, we have remainder motion. This is being set to the countdown in motion minus floor times 60. And these should work as brackets. So let's go ahead and test that and see if it fixes the bug. So if we hit the green button, 640, 639, 638, 637, I am very happy to see that. All right, so if we hit stop, it stops. If we hit start, it starts. And that is wonderful. So there you have it. Thank you to the lovely flowers. I am really mesmerized by this place. I highly recommend you check it out. This is an inspiration from them, and you'll need to come take a look and see it in person. But thank you guys so much for taking a look at this new code. If you have any questions or find any other weird issues like this, please let me know so I can help fix them. And yeah, thank you. Bye.